of time and space. Everywhere and anywhere, every star that ever was. Where do you want to start?
We have recently, I'm going to use the word enjoyed, our visit to France for a bit of light massacring. And now it's time to go 2 by 2 aboard the Ark. I'm Iain.
And I'm Mark, and welcome to All of Time and Space. So without further ado, let's catch up with where we are in the story. It is 10 million years in the future, and the Earth is about to plunge into the Sun. A gigantic space ark has been launched to take the last of humanity to a new life on the planet Refusis. Accompanying the humans on their journey are the Monoids, strange reptilian creatures from an alien world. When the TARDIS materialises on board, the Doctor and his friends are greeted with suspicion, which soon turns to open hostility when Dodo inadvertently infects the Ark's crew with a long-forgotten virus. It is an accident which will have a terrible effect on mankind, an effect which will last for 700 years.
Can you see each other?
Not even that. Oh, we can sense one another, but that is all. That is why it would have been good for Refusis to be inhabited again by life and the signs of life, provided that the beings who come to take our place are peaceful. Child, you are worried.
I think I can hear them coming back.
We must return to the launcher. We must warn one and the others so that we can prepare to deal with these unseen creatures.
We, meaning only the Monoids. When you spoke of it before, you meant that only you and your kind would make the landings, didn't you?
And, I do not have to account to you.
I'll not let you contact them.
And, stay where you are.
What about the Monoid? Do you think he's gone back to the launcher?
We'll soon see.
Refuses to the spaceship Ark. Yes, to give us your report. Are the landings possible? The planet offers everything we need. But I must warn you, listen to this carefully. When we first arrived, we exited. Two, are you there? Two, answer me.
And welcome back, and I'm very pleased to say we've been joined by 2 special guests this episode. You're getting your VFM this time round. We have, in no particular order, friend of the show, the lovely Lindsey. Hello, Lindsey.
Hello, thank you for having me back.
Well, you are one of our favourites, so we couldn't really do a new season and not have you on. And we also have, making her debut on the show, the amazing Millie McKenzie. Hey, Millie.
Hi, guys.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, well, I mean, for anyone who's not witnessed your amazing artwork, I mean, I can't think there's too many people listening to this who won't have seen it. You're all over Twitter, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
If you type in hashtag Doctor Who, it's everywhere. In Doctor Who magazine and everything.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened.
Me and Iain are well gel.
I had a letter printed in 2003.
Oh, did you?
But I've never actually had anything original, artistic or brilliant in there. So I'm, yes, very much in awe and you know, very massively cross. But Millie, how long have you been a Doctor Who fan?
Since 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what that maths is, about 7 years or something. What year are we in now? Is it 22?
Oh, I don't know.
2021.
It's nearly
Here we are.
2022, and we've turned over 3 pages in the diary at once, and we've lost 2 years of our lives, or a 35th of it. No one's entirely sure what day of the week it is, what month it is, what year it is. Let's say you've been a fan for a while, and in that time, you've kind of overtaken people like myself who've been watching the show since the 80s, and you've become, I would say, one of the more artistic personalities associated with fandom. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Thank you for looking at my stuff. That's the most important part. I keep making it. If no one's looking at it, then it's not very much fun. So everybody looking at it and commenting on it makes me feel happy. And it makes you feel happy, hopefully.
I'm quite excited about the fact that I appear to I don't think have encountered Millie before, and I'm not quite sure how that had happened.
Oh my God.
I'm going to have to go and do some research. This is exciting.
You are in for a visual treat.
Oh my word!
Yeah.
That is very impressive and topical.
Yes. Sorry, that's not very.
She's got
That's not
one or
very
two
good.
more that she's
That's
done
not
as
very
well.
good in audio, is it? I just, for the listeners at home, I just showed her. I showed her one of my models of the Monoid.
Anyway, enough of this frivolity. Ian.
Yes, I think that's quite enough of your tomfoolery, Cockram. Tell me, before we proceed with the mind probe, tell me, finally, that you've repaired the time lash?
Well, not exactly.
Right, I'm going to come in like a juggernaut here and say, does that not exactly literally translate as no?
No. Yeah, sorry. I know it's your favourite bit and you do like to,
Mark, you are a disgrace.
I know. I should hand in my scarf and just, give up.
Okay, well, in that case, and again with apologies for the lack of rigorous quizzing, we're going to have to do one of our friendly and informal mind probes.
Oh no, not the mind probe.
Getting to know
Who?
Getting to know all about
Who?
Brilliant.
Excellent.
What we have for your delectation and edification this time around is a very simple kind of bit of psychology, somewhere between word association and nonsense. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 2 words. They might be actors associated with Doctor Who, or writers, or production staff, anyone like that. And I just want your first gut instinct, which one is for you. And we're going to alternate. I'm going to throw the first question at Millie, second one to Lindsey, and then back to Millie in that order. It's quite dull, but I'm hoping that their answers will in some way enliven what is otherwise a fairly leaden idea that I've had 10 minutes ago. Millie,
you put that much thought into it.
I did. I've excelled myself this time.
Ian, just before you dive in.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but is there any possibility that you've given Millie all the nice questions and Lindsey all the not so good ones?
Shut up.
Sorry.
Just shut up. So,
Can I just clarify, Ian? Sorry, when you say
yes.
when you say are they for me? Are you saying do I like them or do I want to be friends with them? Or
of the choice presented to you, which one would you take? Which one would you prefer? Which one's
so it's not one of those. It's not one of those snog, marry, avoid things like FDE do.
Oh no one's avoiding.
Nothing as salacious as that.
Okay. Okay.
No. So either of you, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just say so, and we'll think of something else because no one wants to look like a smarty trousers. So the first question, Millie, Rassilon or Olive Hawthorne?
Olive Hawthorne
is the right answer. How about that? Lindsey, Tegan Javanka or Eric Roberts?
I think you've probably picked people I'm unfamiliar with. I'm going to go with Eric.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah. You can have that.
Mostly because women
Millie.
in Doctor Who don't appear to be written very well for quite a long period of its history. So, choices.
I'm going to make absolutely no comment about that. Millie, back to you. Christopher Eccleston or Barry Letts?
Barry Letts.
Ooh, interesting. I'm making a note on my clipboard. This will be submitted at the end. Lindsey, Chris Chibnall or Ian Levine?
Ooh.
Chris Chibnall.
Interesting. Millie, Rose Tyler or The Daleks?
The Daleks.
Great. Excellent. And Lindsey, Padmasambhava or Raxacoricofallapatorius?
Oh, Raxacoricofallapatorius.
Every time, isn't it? Brilliant. Great stuff. Millie, the Anthony Ainley Master or Captain Jack Harkness?
Anthony Ainley Master.
Yeah! Brilliant. You can
Is the
be
correct
in my
answer.
gang. Lindsey, Peter Capaldi or a bag of jelly babies?
Oh, Peter Capaldi. Any day, any place, anywhere.
There are actually more calories in Peter Capaldi.
I don't really care.
Millie, a choice of stories for you now. Battlefield or The Doctor's Daughter?
The Doctor's Daughter.
Oh, controversial.
Controversial. And unexpected. And finally, Lindsey, Target Books or Big Finish?
Big Finish.
Big Finish. Which brings us neatly to a very big finish. Thank you both. I feel like we've all got a sense of where you're coming from, what your particular individual passions are, and now we can proceed in a seemly fashion to discussing tonight's story.
Yes, thank you for enduring that.
Oh, dear.
Yes. Lindsey,
Hello.
is it fair to say that our track record with the stories that we've asked you to watch has been slightly iffy
Maybe. Yes.
from a certain point of view?
I think often I've ended up with an episode that is not wildly well liked within fandom.
So, while we're on that subject, first thoughts on this particular
So
story?
I think it needs to be noted that when you first said that this is what we were going to watch, in my head, I kind of went the arc in space. And I was like, oh, I think I might have seen this, or at least a bit of this, and that's quite exciting. Because we have been doing this for several seasons now, and in my head, somehow, we had jumped several Doctors ahead.
Wow, if only we were at the first season of Tom Baker, Ian.
I mean, it's our show. We can do what we like, Mark. We could skip ahead.
Give it another 30 years and I'm sure we will get there eventually.
It does feel a little bit like William Hartnell has been on the go for a while now. Bless his little cotton socks.
We are nearing the end.
That's interesting. Actually, I thought there were some really interesting themes. I thought it was strangely prescient, obviously. There are bits that feel very much of the moment. And I think there was some really interesting costume design again.
Yes, I'm sure we'll come back to that at some point. Millie, what were your first thoughts on this? Is this one that you were familiar with?
Yes, it is. I've seen all of the ones that exist, except for the last two Sylvester McCoy episodes. So I saw this probably about 4 or 5 years ago for the first time. And I recall enjoying it at the time. Since then, I've listened to lots of podcasts and things, and my view has been swayed, rather, on it. Based on everybody's talk about racism and things like that with regards to the story. But I watched it again last week, and I think that they might be wrong. So that's going to be an interesting discussion.
To find that, perceived fan wisdom can be a bit dodgy at times.
I think the first 2 episodes are great. I don't particularly like the last 2 episodes very much. I think it is really it really is almost like two different stories, even though it's using the same creatures.
Yeah, I got really confused at one point about whether this was all the same serial. Partly because I'm less familiar with the kind of classic Who structure, and there doesn't seem to be a great deal of consistency in how many episodes are in a serial anyway. Sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's I don't know. So yeah, I thought.
So Lindsey, were you confused when we got to the end of part 2 and it looked like it was all wrapped up?
Yes, and then I was confused at the end of part 4 because it also had wrapped up, but it had wrapped up in part 2.
Yeah.
So
So what you're telling me is there was an episode 3 and an episode 4? Because I just watched. Oh, what a rookie error I have made.
Anyway, we'll all reconvene again in another couple of months' time, and we'll record again once Iain's seen the conclusion to the story. This story is Dodo's first proper trip out in a TARDIS. Obviously, as we record this now, it's not that far away from, sadly, Jackie Lane passing away. I just wondered, Lindsey, when you've been on before, we've given you a story with Susan, and we've given you a story with Vicky. How do you feel Dodo compares to those two characters?
I think the writer's like an irritating teenage girl. Partly I struggle a little bit because it's a fine line between. I didn't want to spoil myself, but sometimes you need a little bit of context to understand like how long the characters have been in the show.
Sure.
And obviously the fact that, as far as I understand it, the previous episodes don't really exist in their entireties. It makes it a little bit complicated. But she arrives wearing this ridiculous outfit, and I'm like, I don't know where in history you're from. So that confused me.
Yeah, if you're coming in completely blind, then yeah. So
I did a little bit of research, confusing. But even that made no sense. So she's gone and she's found the wardrobe room, and that's what she's picked to wear, and then she's just wandered out the door. Did the doctor not give her a safety briefing and just assumed she'd have common sense not to wander out? But she also didn't seem to know that she'd travelled in space, so again, having not known how she came in contact with the doctor, all of that just seemed a bit ridiculous, I think it's safe to say. And then she happened to have an encyclopedic knowledge of Whipsnade Zoo, or whatever it was, which appeared to have three animals in it. I was quite impressed by the quality of the forest, but there weren't that many animals. Yeah. Although I think they were I think there was a live elephant. That's pretty impressive. Yeah, good bonus. I feel like a lot of money was spent on that. So that was quite interesting. But yeah, no, Dodo irritated me greatly, as is the want of the young female character in a classic Doctor Who episode.
Millie, what do you think of Dodo? It's a hard one, isn't it? Because there aren't that many of her stories still around.
Yeah, I think I've only... Is it only this one and the Gunfighters in full? I think that's... Yeah, so of her stories, I've only seen them in, I think, one episode of the Celestial Toymaker that survives. But yeah, I was also... I mean, I think for the part that she is supposed to be playing, she plays it really well. But the part she's supposed to be playing is just god-awful.
Yeah, I will always be really...
she's working with what she's got.
To say that this is not about the actresses. This is not about their ability to play something. It's about the character that is created. And while that sits with the writers and the directors, it also sits with the era in which they were written. So all of these things come with context.
And I'm, as you know, I'm a Kiwi, and I do struggle to understand everybody else's... the differences in all of your English accents. But even I can understand that she has about 4 different accents in this episode.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't sound like that was her fault.
Yeah.
I don't think the producers could decide exactly where they wanted her to be from. So the poor thing is being told one moment she's from the north, and then she's a Cockney, and then she's RP, and it's... Like you say, it's all over the shop, isn't it?
And the doctor's constantly scolding her for speaking weirdly, speaking non-English. I mean, he's not even English himself. Why is it so important to him that she speaks proper English? Doesn't make any sense.
I found that bit absolutely infuriating. The idea that the Doctor is going to force her to abandon a harmless bit of 60s slang and speak this kind of Victorian paterfamilias English. What, he travels through time and space. Is he going to impose the same standard on everyone he ever meets on every planet he ever goes to? It was offensive and ridiculous.
But
and
it's also,
stuffy
I
and
think,
awful.
It's quite typical of Hartnell's Doctor. Like, and again, it is of an era, I suppose, and it comes through the fact that this version of the Doctor he is a grandfather, he is scholarly, he is quite didactic, he clearly tells people off all the time, and then and later Doctors do that too, but he does it in a very specific way that tends to be quite frustrating.
I suppose Pertwee and Colin would have also been in that same camp, whereas I think most of the other Doctors are a bit more chilled out.
And in all fairness, everywhere the Doctor does go in these early years, everybody does talk with very posh English and very pronounced.
Yeah.
I mean, even what are we in the 57th segment of time, we're millions and millions of years in the future, and they talk so, oh my gosh.
This might also be an appropriate moment to talk about the fact that
welcome.
They're also very Caucasian in the future.
Yes.
Yes, troublingly so. But yes, it's always the planet Eton they visit, isn't it? And everyone's, hello, yes, my name's Sebastian Dalek. Do come in.
There are two other notable actors who make their Doctor Who debuts in this story. Anyone care to have a guess at who they were?
Oh, I've got one of them.
I've got one of them.
So we have Michael Sheard.
Hey.
From your neck of the woods there, Lindsay.
That's always exciting.
Yeah.
Lindsay lives in Grange Hill?
She does, yeah. Yeah, just round the corner.
I didn't like to make a thing of it, but mine is not an English accent.
Yeah.
Oh.
She's next door to Gripper Stepston. I can't even say it now. This will mean nothing to Millie because she probably didn't get Grange Hill at home, but exactly.
Oh.
Yes, Michael Sheard, who very prolific actor in Doctor Who terms. This is his first story, and he appears in stories with John Pertwee, Tom Baker, Peter Davison, and Sylvester McCoy. So the big question should be, what did he have against Patrick Troughton and Colin Baker? Maybe they had a feud or something, I don't know.
I find it's very interesting, isn't it, that someone has that kind of a career where Doctor Who isn't necessarily the springboard to bigger and better things. It's just the springboard to coming back onto Doctor Who every 4 or 5 years for the rest of your life. Which is kind of lovely, but
he did get to be Hitler in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Career highlights.
I stand corrected.
I think there's something of the repertory theatre style, I think, about sometimes the casting within Doctor Who, and we see that all the way through. Mm-hmm. Like, even up to Peter Capaldi, like the idea that you have somebody on set that you enjoy so much that you keep them around. I think that's lovely. Like, it's one of those things that I kind of appreciate about, when you sometimes have to like wangle something because you know that everybody's going to recognise them.
And there was another debut in this story, which is a bit of a cheeky one because they're not necessarily on screen, but Roy Skelton.
Yes.
Zippy himself.
Well,
again, we're going to get blank looks from
who
Millie.
Sounded like a Dalek, essentially, for a very good reason.
So he's voicing one of the Monoids, and he goes on to be a voice for the Daleks for many, many years, and Zippy and George from Rainbow.
I love Zippy and George. I do love it.
Who doesn't? I mean, come on.
I think children of a certain era love them. I'm not.
Yeah, well.
Even I know who they are.
Simon Brett from Stranger in Space does a very, very decent Zippy impression.
He does, doesn't he? One day I'll have to show him my George.
So
I didn't say a bungle for a minute, but anyway.
Which person was Michael Sheard playing?
Oh, he was playing.
Oh God!
Checks Wikipedia.
Was he a medic, like sciencey guy?
He
was one of the doctors doing something. He was probably trying to control the R number.
Well, I was about to say he was wearing a face shield if he was, which was quite impressive.
He was. Yeah.
Those face shields are pretty cool. I love how even the monoid without a mouth has got a face shield on.
Yeah. So, where were their voices coming out of?
And where do they eat?
Ooh,
well, no, like the voices were coming out from like vibrations. They had were those necklaces not like weird? Like, you know, when somebody has lost their vocal cords and they have to press like an electrical thing.
Yeah.
Oh, and tracheotomy, man.
I kind of assumed it was like that,
Yeah.
although not all of the actors were consistent in touching their necklace when they were speaking. Like, some of them very purposefully did and some of them didn't, and it was a little bit confusing.
That is a very good observation, which I totally, now that you've said it, thinking back, yes, I know exactly what you mean, but at the time, I didn't actually make that association. But he was Zippy. What was his name?
Roy Skelton.
Roy Skelton got to be... So he was just doing the voice. He wasn't in the costume.
Yes. I don't think so.
So the guy in the costume's giving it all the arm flourish. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And Skelton's just sitting at the side of the studio, trying not to sound too much like a Dalek. But he's never been a Dalek yet, has he?
No.
If this was his debut, then what you're saying is on the back of this, the producers thought, oh, he'd make a good Dalek if only we hadn't just done a massive.
I think he gets to be a Cyberman before he's a Dalek.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Mm.
I should resign, really, shouldn't I, from this
You
podcast?
should.
I've got no business being here. I know nothing. My questions are silly, and I haven't even got enough sound on this microphone. I'm going to go. I'm sorry. I'm wasting your time.
All right. Anyway, thanks for joining us. And Millie. Hello. You have created your very own monoid. Thoughts on the overall design?
From the waist up, I really like them. I think they're quite unique. They're with their little eyeball in their mouth and their mop hairdo. I think they're quite cute. I would love to see what they actually look like in colour. Whether they are, I'm assuming they're green.
Oh wow!
But they could be, they could be fluorescent pink for all I know. But I imagine that they're green, like a lizard. I would like to see them in colour, and I like their podgy chest, tummy area when they go side on. And I also like the very obvious zip up the back. I'm not sure why they allowed them to stand.
Welcome to the 1960s.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they allowed them to stand with their back to the camera at points because it's such an obvious zip. But their legs, the fact that they're just one big flipper basically walking around.
Yeah, that's a bit bizarre.
And
isn't
there's
it?
that one scene when that poor number 2 walks into the house and with the Refusion house and just trips down the step.
Yeah.
I've rewound it about 3 times.
Do you think that was their one concession to trying to make it not look like a person in a suit?
I guess so, yeah.
Let's just sort of wrap their legs together. Yeah. I think, there's a very 1960s aesthetic to them, probably helped by the Beatles mop tops. I think they're kind of cute.
I think they're kind of cute.
More so when they're realised by Millie. But,
I think they're a really good example of where Doctor Who takes risks that even like Star Trek doesn't. Like I am a huge Star Trek fan. And the character design for this period just feels much more kind of like they've just gone all in. They've gone, well, clearly it's going to look like a costume because it's a costume, but we're going to put some thought into it and we're going to try for this, like one eye and like this weird flipper thing. And like, yeah, I think I love that about classic Who, where they just go, I'm going to do a thing.
Yeah. I'm just going to do a thing. I like that. Yeah.
As Millie mentioned them just now, we've got the ultimate concession to budgetary cutbacks, and that is the inclusion of invisible aliens.
It's becoming a bit of a well-worn trope already, isn't it?
Oh, and it's going to continue for a while.
But like, I think, and maybe it's because I haven't seen much of it, I don't think it was really badly done. Like, I think they used it as well as you like, yeah, they needed it for plot reasons as well, because obviously there was the invisible return to the planet, which was quite helpful.
Yeah.
I think, for me, one of the interesting changes in the monoids that we saw across the 4 episodes was the fact that, because I remember like in the first episode, and I'm watching them do really rudimentary, really rubbish sign language. Like, for all the last episode that I reviewed with you guys, somebody had put a lot of effort into, like, movement and, like, delivery and in a consistent way of thinking. Like, this felt very much like they were just told, make some gestures. And then the human will turn around and say, oh, this is what they've said. And that lack of voice, this idea that they still needed an interpreter and that there was so little put into the language. And then when we see them again, all of a sudden, they're in charge, but they have a language, they have a way of communicating. And I think that's quite an interesting kind of dynamic that we see.
There's also one moment when one of the monoids communicates with the main prosecutor guy from the trial. He doesn't move his hands in the slightest. They just look at each other in the eye, and he just knows exactly what's happened. He comes and he says, the monoids all been attacked by this terrible fever, but there was no movements. there was no sign language whatsoever. It was like telepathy. I thought they just completely missed a mark.
And again, so that fever thing, that introduction of the virus is a really interesting commentary on, or a reflection of the, of our visitations upon indigenous populations. And for all its crudity, there are quite a lot of interesting kind of takes on that power dynamic all the way through the 4 episodes. And they kind of turn them on their heads and they play around with them a little bit, and they can definitely be critiqued. But the fact that they're being done in the 60s, I think, is quite interesting.
I think it owes a little bit to War of the Worlds, that whole idea of the common cold being something that can cause devastating illness to people who aren't used to it. I thought it was quite a neat touch, because obviously Stephen's from the far future, and I'm guessing at that point they don't have the common cold, so he comes down with it as well, which...
He just got the man flu, because he knew exactly what the cold was. Like, it wasn't... He just said, oh no, they're fine, they've just got Dodo's cold. So from the world that he lives in, they do have colds, and he knows exactly what it is. Okay. So when he got hit with it, he just was complaining like...
It was the worst cold
being
ever.
A bit dramatic.
Like, she started sneezing and I was like, is this going to be like an allergy thing? Like, it felt like it was going to be an allergy thing, because it was very much like a sneeze. And then it was like the dogs were just telling her off again. And then... Yeah.
Chekhov's snot.
I've seen better acted colds from a sponge. Sorry.
And it was over in about half an hour too.
I want to go back to episode 1, where I think they're still in the jungle, and Dodo is about to sneeze, and Stephen just steps in very close in a 2-shot, and just holds her very tightly, and she's fighting the sneeze, and they're looking into each other's eyes for approximately 30 or 40 seconds. And for me, that was the most powerfully erotic piece of filmmaking I've seen this side of Louis Buñuel or possibly Godard. I just thought this is cinema. I was blown away by the frisson that was engendered in that moment. Am I alone in that?
I made a note of that myself.
Very possibly.
I found it extremely uncomfortable. I was so concerned by that scene. It's actually made me feel ill, because he holds her, like, she's 16 years old, right? And he holds her too intimately for too long.
And as far as we know, they've only just met.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's been lots of adventures in between, but it sounds very much like it's a straight follow-on from the previous story.
Exactly, and he's impressing his entire huge body against her, and far too long.
Yeah,
and I found it really horrible.
Strange.
And I mean, you just can't silence a sneeze by putting your finger under your nose. It just doesn't work that way.
It works in cartoons. Obviously, Iain didn't get on particularly well with Ian Chesterton. And we had high hopes that Stephen was going to buck that trend of male companions that he doesn't get on with. But it started off well, but it seems to have somewhat swan-dived.
I mean, he's just terrible by this point. He's basically an angry Blue Peter presenter in waiting, and he's. I've said previously that his acting by this time is just to pick, even if the person gives him like a 2-word sentence, he just picks one of those words and just shouts it. If you met him at a party, he'd say, "I'm Stephen Taylor," You know, that's literally all he does is quiver with indignant rage in such a way that his magnificent hair sculpture equally quivers. And by now it's genuinely very grating. Now, I suppose if I'd only watched a couple of stories here or there, it probably wouldn't be something I'd picked up on. But week in, week out, the viewers must have been going spare by this point. Just get rid of him. Oh.
Are you starting to yearn for Chesterton now?
I do think that this episode is quite interesting in that, other than the fact that they introduced the virus, which is obviously quite important to the plot line of episodes 1 and 2 at least. Like, I don't know that any of them really cover themselves in glory. Like, would I like this episode better without the Doctor or his two companions? Yes, I probably would.
If you don't get really fed up with us continually asking you to come back onto our show, it would be interesting to see whether that changes when we get to
I have seen some of Patrick Troughton, and I found it less challenging, I think. But I think, you know, I will always come back and say that, you know, the Doctor Who legacy is built upon, like, where it comes from. I think all of this is really important, and I don't come at any of this with any emotional investment. And I haven't even, like, I haven't even spent the time to, like, watch it all. So I do have a very specific point of view, and I will readily be corrected by other people who know more than I do.
Well, I think, you know, as much as we all enjoy picking it apart and, you know, laughing at some of the less good bits about it, I think there were some plus points in this story. I really love the direction when they leave the TARDIS. It's amazing. They've got these crane shots, and as you said before, the jungle. Yeah, you
couldn't see the walls or anything. Impressive. Like, I was quite impressed. Like the bit where the Doctor's like, "Oh, there's a metal ceiling," and "Oh, the floor." I was like, "Oh, really, Doctor?" Like,
it's a
but yeah,
world
the
away
actual
from the
actual
chase.
scenery and the even compared to the web planet, where it was like they had to Vaseline everything, and it was like clearly like the floor of the studio. Like, it felt very much more kind of high spec.
And I think the idea of having that twist in the middle of the story for its time was quite a big thing, because for a show that deals in time travel, it doesn't tend to address time travel that much. It tends to be the sort of the means for getting them into the story rather than being part of the story. But this time you really are struck by, oh wow, they've come back to the same place, and it makes you wonder why they don't perhaps do that a bit more often. But I thought that worked really well. I
think they sort of maybe had seen episode 1 of the Space Museum and taken the idea of doing a trick with time and just did it so much better and so much more tidily and straightforwardly. But it did feel very fresh and very innovative and very much not something the show does. And as you say, yes, it is something the show should be doing really quite a lot. You might describe it as the show's meat and potatoes, and in different hands, perhaps that would have been the kind of show we'd have got week in, week out. But I thought that was a real masterstroke.
As much of it, obviously, as you guys have, but it feels very much like they're still finding their sci-fi feet. Like, obviously, I'm aware that it started out as a predominantly kind of educational, historical kind of feat. And this is just another really good example of where they've kind of taken that and actually they've gone, well, we've got a spaceship. Like, let's do some actual, like, space sci-fi stuff.
I wondered if you might appreciate this one a bit more, because you do sort of come at it more from a sci-fi background in terms of, I think so. And I think Star Trek and what have you.
There are always some lovely things that I find really amusing. So, like, the costuming of the humans with the ribbons. And, like, if you're a girl, you got, like, a sash in one place, and if you're a man, you got a sash in another place, but everybody's pants were on show. Like, I find that really funny. And one of the things that that strikes me is that it, like, the costuming isn't fantastic, but you know what? If you look at TNG that was made in, like, the late 80s and the 90s, like, yeah, it's really not. You could have put that costume onto several TNG episodes and it would have been an improvement on what they were wearing. Don't run on the grass. So yeah, I think there are some interesting things there. Like they do stuff really well. Like not all of it. Their ability to write women still shocking. But yeah, no, there's definitely there's a lot of stuff in there that's to be respected.
Millie, what did you take away from it as positive points from the story? What did you really like about it?
I also really loved the aspect that they used of time. They just... But with the whole classic series, there's very few occasions where they actually use time travel as a plot point. It's always, as you say, it gets them somewhere at the start of the story and it takes them away at the end. But, you know, I came into the Doctor Who world in the deep in the heart of the Moffat era, which is just all timey-wimey, and that's what I love. As far as I'm concerned, that's what Doctor Who is for me, because that's where I came into it. I don't
think you'll be getting too many arguments on this show.
So, the fact that the classic series doesn't really utilise it, there's only a few occasions, I don't know, I think Mordra and Undead is pretty good for usage of time. And this is
Day
also...
Day of the Daleks as well.
Day of the Daleks, yes, that's great too. So I really, really appreciated that. I think that's fantastic. And I really would like them to address this again, the fact that when they turn up somewhere that they might be bringing a disease upon the population. I think that's really important. And it's never been dealt with again, has it? I don't believe, in the entire 57
I'm trying
years.
to think off the top of my head.
Yeah. I'd love to see something like that again now in the current era. And also the second part that's great is the coming back 700 years later and seeing the consequences of their actions. That's always awesome to see.
The whole thing with the statue.
Even if it makes no logical sense that it's going to take that long to build.
And what are they building it out of? Where are they getting all these rocks? They're on a spaceship.
They obviously got to the halfway point of the statue because he's still got human legs and knees, and then they thought, oh, top half though. Ooh,
it's only a monoid head. So the revolution from the monoids has only just happened. It's happened it was probably about 600 years of the Guardians still being in charge, and then for some reason the monoids have just recently taken over with the time enough to just build the head in the shape of the monoid. So what have they been doing since then? I don't understand. There's a little bit of confusion there around at what point this revolution happened. It sounds as though it happened quite soon after the team left, but the time doesn't really work because there's no way the monoids would have built the rest of that sculpture as a human.
Okay, so maybe here is where some of the controversy comes, because and I might have missed a reference to this, but is it the Guardians that give them the ability to talk, and once they have the ability to speak, they then use that to overthrow the humans? Because that does feel slightly problematic. This idea that if you give somebody the freedom to communicate, they will then use it to overthrow you and become the oppressor is... I can see where some people would find that difficult.
Yeah. It is hard to pinpoint exactly the reason for how and why the monoids did overthrow the humans. They mentioned something about that the mutation of the virus made them lose their will, and so they didn't have any strength, so the monoids could easily come in and overthrow them somehow.
But to be fair, they were pretty wet to start with, so it wouldn't take much more than a cold to absolutely finish them off. So
yeah, I think there's some things that I would have liked to see. I would have liked to see a bit more of the structure and the relationship between the Guardians and the monoids before they all started getting sick. I don't know that I really understood it as a slave relationship, and maybe I just missed some cues. I did think it was really telling that when they started getting sick, the Guardians weren't really all that bothered until they started getting sick. I think that was quite telling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know that we saw enough of it to really understand that they had been oppressed.
I never saw oppression in their society either in those first two episodes. The racism almost that comes into the story is not from the Guardians' relationship to the Monoids, because they treat them really well. They're completely integrated in their society. You never at one point see any of them coming to them, serving them a cup of tea or anything like that. They're there, the prosecutors and the court, they're completely integrated in their society, perfectly happy. Perhaps they're a little bit docile. Maybe they are the working class, perhaps not so much the upper class. But I don't think that they're oppressed. But then you get the three visitors come in, the Doctor, Dodo, and Stephen. And Stephen instantly says, these are the people that serve you. Dodo, when they're having the funeral procession, she says, oh, it sounds like savages. And then the Doctor, when they're finding the cure, he looks to a Monoid and says, I don't think that you're actually as dumb as everybody thinks that you are. So, but nobody has ever said that they're not smart. Nobody has ever said that these are our servants. But these three people have come in and have made an assumption that they are, because they are not humans.
Or is it just that those characters are the tools that the writers have used to tell us that they are servants? And I think that's where it gets difficult. And I think particularly with writing from this era, I suspect the latter might be true. Like, we look at it and we go, yeah, absolutely, we are projecting our beliefs about your society onto your society. And if it was a contemporary episode of Doctor Who, then I think that's exactly what they would be saying, that we were misinterpreting that relationship. But I suspect that it's just what we would now consider to be poor writing. I was also going to say that if we did get an episode with this kind of theme again, like the idea of us bringing in a contagion, and I'm sure that we've seen something, there's something ringing at the back of my head about us doing something, or maybe leaving something, or I don't know, I can't remember, but you just know that there would be a whole swathe of fandom that would be like, oh my gosh, you keep trying to teach us stuff, stop this being about moral things, and just let it be about space and time and Doctor Who, and he's always a man, and you guys are ruining everything for us.
So Ian Levine or Chris Chibnall?
I do not hate Chris Chibnall.
Yes, well.
No.
I think there are issues there, and I will happily acknowledge them, but I think demonising him is ridiculous. And I'm very much pro, if you don't like this Doctor, that's absolutely fine, but we cannot be seen to go back to another stream of white men. If they cast a white man next, I'm going to be really angry. Really angry.
I was going to suggest that in a kind of devil's advocate way, possibly where Paul Erickson and his co-writer, whose name escapes me, was it Lesley?
His wife, wasn't it?
Oh, was it his wife?
Yeah.
Mrs. Erickson.
Although, admittedly, this is through the prism of Wikipedia, which I'm sure is incredibly accurate.
Oh, it's totally accurate.
Never gets facts wrong.
No.
I did read that she didn't actually contribute anything towards it, but he asked if she could have a credit.
Was he married to Paula Moore as well, then?
Yeah, it's becoming a bit of a theme, or it will be a few years down the line.
But I was wondering if that level of vagueness and non-explicit dynamic was left in the script to avoid being deliberately, yes, this is a race relations allegory, or maybe they thought if we just keep it vague, and maybe some comments from an earlier or a later draft got through and just skewed it slightly in a weird way. Because I don't think it was addressing any issues. I think it was telling a fairly straightforward kind of 1930s B-movie story. And I think if you wanted to make points and kind of address issues, you could have done that very simply with that script, with a few minor tweaks here and there. So I'm wondering if they deliberately avoided that kind of thing.
I don't know that the second part works if that's the case. Because for me, what you need oppression in one direction, followed by oppression in the other direction, followed by the evolved third party saying, no, you can only come and live on my planet if you learn to get along with each other as equals. Like, the entire arc doesn't make sense. Ooh, arc, see what I did there? Yeah, if that doesn't happen, then the arc doesn't work. Like, I think it was heavy-handed, and I think it came across as being like third-party observations of what wasn't happening. But if it wasn't that, then it doesn't make any sense, to me at least.
So we're saying this is probably problematic, but we're not clever enough to understand.
Well, you and I are.
I'm not. It's too late at night for me.
Yeah.
And we also have to remember that they're pumping these out really quick. You know, they've got to get these done. Like, so if something slipped through the cracks, maybe something that was a little bit clearer slipped through the cracks, then it isn't through any fault of them other than the fact that they just had to get this thing recorded. They had to get it produced and put onto TV. And they're making a program for kids to watch, and there's got to be monsters in it that are angry and want to kill the humans. I mean, that's just what it is, isn't it? It's either that or it's a historical, and it's not a historical, so it has to have monsters in it. So although the first 2 episodes are quite thought-provoking, the second 2 episodes just become a sci-fi trope, which is a little bit boring.
Maybe there's an element as well at the time, which will come to play later, of, you know, seeing it as a sort of ephemeral thing it's on that week and then it won't be seen again. So maybe if they've got sort of concerns like that, they're just thinking, well, you know, we'll be on to the next story within a couple of weeks. So
and the nature of analysis has changed so much since we were able to go back almost instantaneously and like screen grab and comment and like, here is this clip and here is me talking about this clip. And in an era where like video machines weren't like a thing, this idea that there could be like a mass outrage that, you know, there had been like sedition and anti-empire
Twitter wars going on about
whatever.
This story. It wouldn't be pretty. Do we have anything else positive to say about this? Because I do feel like we've been, well, not overly negative, but I think we've been fairly even-handed, but we have perhaps pointed out some of the shortcomings of the story.
The little skate pod was cool.
Yeah?
Yeah, the little skate pod with the way the doors opened. And the little
that was cool.
Yeah, the little seat in the door and the wall joins together. I thought that was quite cool. And I did like the statue. I think that is a really great image. And it just the way that the Refusion picks it up at the end and they just chuck it out out into space. I think there's some really good visuals in this story. Some really good visuals.
I was totally struck by how much better some of the graphics were than in anything else that I've watched from this era. I think in particular, to be fair, this might also have been like how I was watching it. So I took Iain's advice and I was actually watching it like on my phone in quite like a high-res thing. But there was an image particularly of Earth, I think, quite early on. And it was beautifully done. Like, given what they were working with, I was like, it's lovely. Like that, where it like moved across the porthole or the view screen or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the first time I think I've ever seen an effect on Doctor Who from while watching the older stuff at this period and not been like, oh my gosh, it's a model in a sandpit. Or like you can clearly see like the guys behind the scenery like holding it up because it's shaking too much or they need it to shake or whatever it is. Or can we talk about so we talked about the metal roof and when he leant down to like touch the ground and his hand like shakes to make it look like the ground. Anyway, sorry. We're saying nice things. But yeah, no, in particular that image, but actually quite a lot of them were significantly better than in other episodes I've watched.
Oh, good. We're winning you round eventually. By the time we finish with it, you'll be a Hartnell fangirl.
Maybe.
I love the Hartnell era. I really do. I think the little things like him putting his hand on the ground and shaking his hand to make it look like it was trembling. I think that's cute. Yeah. I think that's really sweet because there's no other way to do it, and it's got this lovely sort of quaint feel to it. You know, here we are in 2021 with all the technology that we see. And we're still watching them, aren't we? And we're still loving it, and we still smile when he does it.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right that there was no other way to do that. And like, you know, even relatively recently, like the Star Trek crews talk about like being taught how to shake, like when the ship's in turbulence, because like they didn't have hydraulic stages. Yeah. So like up until relatively recently, like they all had to learn like how you shake to make it look like the ship is doing the same thing as everybody else in the room. So like these like as much as I might jest about it, like yeah, absolutely, that's how you do it.
There's a lot of it is done with the love you'd get in like a children's school production, isn't it? It's so well intentioned and so earnest, and they're trying so hard. You can't help but love it and buy into it in a way.
I think because of the limitations of the technology they were having to work with at the time, you've got this sort of multi-camera setup, and it is very much like a stage play. You know, everyone has to hit their marks. There's no sort of real room for manoeuvre, so that kind of puts a restriction on what you can do to begin with. But I find just being able to watch this in context and seeing it through, there's something to enjoy in every story, even if they're not necessarily ones that you're gonna, rave about to your friends. There's always moments that you come away with thinking, yeah, I really like that.
And for me, so as well as seeing the progression in the effect and in the quality of the scenery and stuff, I'm also seeing like the pacing of this one felt much better. So as much as it was very much like an arc of two halves, like at no point did I like try and like Google how many episodes were in this thing, because like some of the other ones I've watched, you're like, oh, this feels like it's been going on forever, and that didn't feel like it was the case this time. And I don't know if that was just chance, because this one only happened to be 4 episodes. Like, I did get to the end of episode 4, and I had to like quickly do a thing before BritBox plays episode 5. I was like, is this part of the same serial? I don't think it's part of the same serial, because all of the episodes have different names. It's quite hard. Yeah. Like, it just comes up with the name of the episode, and you're like, oh, right, okay. And then I was like, oh, that's a different name. And I was like, I wonder if this is a different story. Anyway, it was. But yeah, no, it felt much better. So, like, it definitely feels like we're seeing progress. And that's actually really lovely for me to be able to, like, drop in and out and just see little snapshots, because I love Doctor Who. I do not have enough time in my life to watch it all. I cannot be a completionist at this point in my life. So yeah, I'm enjoying this as a kind of like...
That's because you're so much younger than me and Iain, you see. It's, we've got to that sad part of our lives where, the end's not far off, so we're just trying to cram in as much as we can before,
The less said about like how often I've rewatched things like Project Runway and things is probably the better. Or Voyager. I must have watched Voyager many, many, many times back to front.
You're a fan of Voyager, you never mentioned it.
I just like to drop it in, because did you know what? Voyager's captain is in this new series that we're going to get from Star Trek this year.
Oh, Janeway.
That was very much a Bob moment, wasn't it? Anyway, I'm very excited about Prodigy, which I believe is arriving in October.
Yeah, they seem to be making about 500 Star Trek series.
This is the new Golden Age, or the Platinum Age, I think we should be calling it. The Platinum Age of Star Trek.
You're just rubbing it in our faces because we're having to get by with, half a dozen episodes every couple of years.
No, I think it's just different. I think Star Trek is a franchise and Doctor Who is a show. And I love Doctor Who, but like, it hasn't ever really become something of which there are like... They tried at one point when we had Torchwood and then Class, and it didn't quite happen. But both of those had their place, though. I enjoyed both of them.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Oh, and the Sarah Jane Adventures. Good point. I have never watched the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Oh, that's on BritBox now as well. So,
don't. I need to cancel my BritBox
got a subscription. You can just, check out.
I live on my own and I have like 3 streaming subscriptions. This is a problem. Anyway, I need more eyes or less subscriptions. One of these two things.
I had one question. Going back to Dodo and this being her first story, and her... Is she really supposed to be 16 years old? Or is that just a kind of ballpark figure we're assuming?
That's just my guess. I don't know what she's supposed to be.
I think I looked her up on
done
Wikipedia.
That with the previous two, haven't they?
And they did say 16.
Because and again, Jackie Lane, obviously very sad that she's gone, but she did feel like a slightly older companion in that role, like a 30-year-old trapped in the body of the annoying teenage companion. Did anyone else feel that? Or?
Yeah, I feel that too, Ian. She's like a 30-year-old trapped playing a 16-year-old who was actually playing a 5-year-old.
It's a long history of the ages of actresses being slightly like, we need a load of teenagers, so let's cast them all in their 20s. I would have happily believed she was anywhere between the age of like 14 and 30. Like, I think it's just one of those things that you just kind of have to somehow take it as they're playing it. But yeah, she was playing a very precocious teenager, I think.
I remember seeing a video clip of, I think it was Carol Ann Ford, saying how she used to get lots of fan mail, and she had one very affectionate fan of, he was in his teens and he wrote to her and most upset to find out that she was in her 20s and she had a child and she was married and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, there's definitely a precedent set for that. But although that said, I think as we move, well, jumping up ahead too far, I think we're going to get closer to people playing their actual age when we change up again.
I was about to say.
But that's for another show.
Well, Billie Piper was not 16, I think it's safe to say.
Yeah, just a touch over.
Yeah, and she wasn't playing 16, but she was playing something not vastly over it while she was in her mid-30s, I think. So.
Yeah, she was supposed to be about a 19-year-old, wasn't she, I think?
Yeah. I don't want to malign her by saying she was in her 30s when she started playing Rose, but she wasn't 19.
It's like,
we've got it recorded now, Lindsay.
Well,
it's like Roger Moore. He was supposed to be a young man when he started playing James Bond, not 56.
I saw a No Time to Die trailer in the cinema today. Very exciting.
Oh. Yeah.
Oh.
Daniel Craig improves with age.
And so does Freddie Mercury.
Interesting.
Okay.
You genuinely don't know how to take that.
I think that's going to stay in. That might even be the trailer. Yeah.
We have skewed off topic once or twice, haven't we? Sorry, that's usually my fault.
Millie, you got to follow that now. Did you have anything else you wanted to get out there before we wrap this up and give it a score?
No, I think I've covered
You can
everything.
regain your composure.
Oh, security kitchen. Let's just discuss the security kitchen.
Oh, yeah, we have. Could we not mention the security kitchen?
Oh, yeah.
I just
So
love the
I've never
security
known
kitchen.
what that was from. It was amazing. What a
Yeah, we don't have that
concept.
in Star Trek.
So was this the first time you've seen this, Ian?
Yeah, I watch most of these kind of on the day, or I've watched this story throughout the week. And so for some reason I associated the security kitchen with that episode of The Enemy of the World that had survived, and I always assumed when I watched it properly
I can see that.
I'd get to that bit. But this came out of like a bolt from the blue, and it was like, oh, brilliant, yes.
I think this is very much a necessity of lack of budget. So they needed a cell, but they also needed a kitchen. So, security kitchen.
I think any race of intelligent beings like the Monoids would come up with something where you combine, a penitentiary with a place that makes magic food appear when you drop it's like they're dropping like a little pill in some water and it turns into a bunch of fried chicken.
I mean, the only thing missing was Greg from MasterChef as some sort of brutal overlord.
To me, this tastes of oppression, slavery, and racism. This is as tough as time travel gets.
But was this chicken skin crispy? Possibly their lowest moment of all time. Let us tell this Indian woman she does not know how to make curry. I have to say, it is one of the better
examples. And then they cut to John
examples.
Road in the corner, and he's like, "Oh, someone's pissed in my trousers." He's a drunk TV chef. Don't worry.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, neither do they. That's the fun.
Oh dear! It is one of the better kind of food alternative things that we do see, though. I think, and again, it feels like something we wouldn't have seen last time I was on, or 2 times I was on. Certainly, all of these are changes and evolutions in the show, and yeah, this is good.
And it's a more confident approach to science fiction. By now, they can do rockets, they can do planets, they can do alien races. Now they're thinking, what do people eat? What do people take on interstellar journeys? It's a real evolution in the approach to depicting science fiction on television.
We haven't talked about the miniaturization technology, though.
I was just thinking of that.
Now, that was quite ropey, wasn't it? Because if you stand in a cubicle, and then you shrink a bit, and you shrink a bit more, and you shrink a bit. And then another guy comes in and retracts a Petri dish. And if you haven't managed to fall in that Petri dish, you've had it. I mean, you're going to get stepped on by the next guy. They shrink.
Do they redress that in 42 to Doomsday when they do pretty much the same thing? I know we're skipping ahead another 20 years, but, you know.
I can't possibly comment. I did think it was particularly funny. Like, he turned and did, like, what I think of as what's his name? That's awful. Bruce Forsyth, slightly kind of like...
Oh, nice. Yeah.
We got like a muscle man sort of pose that then shrunk down into nothing. But again, like the idea of going, oh no, the entire population is here. It's just that they're all in these banks. Now, again, everybody who isn't white and went to Eton is apparently like, you know, not allowed to be in charge, so therefore is in one of these banks. But again, it's just, it's a sci-fi idea that's a little bit more complicated than anything that we've seen so far. Or I've seen so far anyway.
Yeah.
That's true. It's a genuine attempt to address the kind of idea of how do we, you know, because of, you know, how many gallons of fuel you'd need per pound of matter you're trying to blast across the universe, how do we minimize the weight of transporting the entire human race, put them in Petri dishes, and then put them next to an ancient reel-to-reel tape recorder on the wall. That's handy. And yeah, just have a very streamlined spaceship with a security kitchen.
If they were trying to minimise...
And just give everyone ribbons instead of clothes, and then that weighs less.
If they were trying to minimise fuel, you know, with weight, they probably shouldn't have had all that rock that they were building the statue out of.
Yeah, no.
Or some elephants.
Yeah, maybe they should have miniaturised the elephants too.
If we want to pull apart their logic, like I'm absolutely concerned that there were like, I don't know, maybe 40 humans each time that we saw them in the Guardian group. Like the interbreeding over the course of 700 years is going to be deeply problematic. And like we don't have 2 elephants because we don't need 2 elephants because the rest of them are all miniaturized. So like did that elephant just die? Like what happened?
Just lonely. Just if I keep walking round, maybe I'll find another elephant. It's heartbreaking.
Well, but what was the elephant bringing to like the ecological diversity of the ship? Like, well,
dung.
Yeah, fit.
Yeah.
One elephant is not good.
I think it was just for the humans' entertainment. It was just their own little private zoo, I think. That they must just maybe wake some animals up every now and then and put them in the zoo, and then maybe once they're dead, they wake up a few more animals. I'm not really sure.
I'm just going to say this now. Like, there's no way that elephant was fitting into the miniaturization raid tank.
I did like, do you guys remember seeing the little children monoids? There's little, I'd like to see them more. Right at the very beginning when the trio are captured out in the jungle, and these little monoids are hiding or camouflaged in the jungle. Yes. And when they stand up, they're just little tiny ones. They're little children monoids. I think they're really cute, and I wish we'd seen more of them. Because there were children humans in the main Citadel area. It would be quite nice to have the little monoid kids playing with them at one point, but they didn't do that. So.
Segregation.
Interesting. It's some kind of apartheid system they had there.
Who knows? Who knows?
The more we scratch away at the surface of this, the more sorry picture it paints.
Can we talk about how so the jungle scenery was excellent. Dodo was really irritating. The Doctor was infuriating. But the monoids stalking was also slightly hysterical. Like every time they'd walk past, a monoid would just pull a branch back and be like, with its eye.
Well, we haven't really covered the flamboyant arm gestures of number one, who just spent the whole time declaiming dramatically. It was like he was in a production of I Clavdivs. And, it was a really wonderful thing.
And when number two accidentally gives his plan away.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, no, I didn't say that.
Okay, we could also comment on the fact that the monoids don't actually get names.
That's very true. And even when they're given the kind of agency of having a voice and being able to form their own society, and
they're still called number one and number two.
They don't bother giving each other names either. They just now, is that because they're a very functional business-like race who don't want to waste time on long names? They just go, you're number one, you're number two, you're 87, deal with it. Or because they've never had names before, maybe it was just not something that occurred to them.
So what happens now, because number 1 and number 2 and quite a few of the probably number 1 to number 10 are all dead, and what happens now? Does number 36 become number 1 in the New World? What happens?
That's a very good question.
Well, are they ranks as opposed to names?
Oh. Do you think Patrick McGowan was watching this when he came up with the idea for the prisoner?
I think Dr. Evil was. I will have a number 2. Oh, that came out wrong. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant that.
That's also staying in.
Coincidentally, I do just have to step away from the microphone.
Oh, it's like being back on with Bob.
You've heard of white noise, this is brown noise.
Mark, Jeffrey Cockram. What a thing to say.
Sorry, yes, it's not a thing to do in impolite company, sorry. No. Shall we?
Can I just one last final interjection before we score it, maybe?
Yes.
I thought Hartnell was quite good again in this one. It felt like he'd been on as long a production break as we have on this show, because he seemed to be a lot calmer, a lot more confident, and a lot less kind of stressed. And I noticed far fewer Billy fluffs than is normally.
I didn't spot any at all, actually.
He's in it a lot too. He's so I know that back then, that the Ian Chesterton and the Stephen Taylors were hired to basically be the action man, whereas because the Doctor can't. But Ian was just in the security kitchen the entire time, and Ian. Stephen was just in the security kitchen.
Stephen Taylor.
Yeah, for the last 2 episodes.
Stephen,
and the Doctor was out there doing everything. He's.
Yeah.
We don't need that extra young man, do we? We just need
you're
the
right.
Doctor.
The Doctor was doing all his own heavy lifting, and there was and so Stephen Taylor was redundant, and so was his wig, which was half the production budget. And this, correct me if I'm wrong, but as we leave this story and head into the Celestial Toymaker, that was the first time they were seriously trying to get rid of Hartnell. But he's just given, I think, a completely fine performance. So it must have just been his offset antics and tomfoolery that they were so tired of at this juncture.
Yeah, I don't think he was on the best of terms with the producers at this point. I think they definitely had plans to get him out at some point. So yeah, that's why he goes invisible at the end of this one, because in the Celestial Toymaker, without jumping too far ahead, he has to be invisible for that story, and there were talks of when he is no longer invisible, it would be a different actor.
Well, that's what I thought, but I mean, you don't get any sense of that from the quality of Hartnell's performance in this story. So, I mean, it just goes to not only his fundamental skill as an actor, but his professionalism as a human being, that he turned in one of, I think, his strongest and most comfortable performances this late in his
I think the other way to look at that is that sometimes when we realise that it's make or break time, we somehow find a reserve to produce something that is better than we have been able to so far. And while I'm reasonably naive about all of the kind of history behind this, I've watched one or two things and read some stuff. And my understanding is that this was something that he was really passionate about. And if he thought he was going to lose this, then maybe, he was like, I'm going to do everything I can to sleep my 8 hours and learn these lines and stand where I need to stand to be sure to try and convince him not to get rid of me.
That's a very, very good interpretation. You're probably entirely correct, and I'm probably completely wrong in what I was saying. But a last roll of the dice for Billy Boy then. Should we score it?
I think we should. Let's come to Lindsey first. What would you like to rate this out of 10? I always get to this point and realise that
I should have gone back and seen what I gave other episodes. Because it's all about comparisons. I'm going to give this like a 7.5, I think. It feels quite strong for me. Like, I think it's not without its flaws, and it is still very much of its time, and there are still things that frustrate me about it. But actually, I think it's pretty sound. I think it does some good stuff, and I think it raises some interesting questions.
Yay! I'm happy that you're actually relatively happy with the story we've given you this time. Huzzah! Millie, what would you like to score this one out of 10?
Well, I find it quite entertaining. I find, as I mentioned before, the first two episodes I actually really genuinely adore and could watch them quite a few more times again and not be bored. I find the last two episodes just, although they're good, they're paced well, I just find that it's such a predictable story. You know, aliens are just trying to wipe out the humans, basically. And that makes me sad because the first two parts are really quite good. So I think based on that, I would probably give it a 7. It had a lot of potential, but it failed in a couple of points.
Good stuff. Iain.
It's a 10 from me, Mark.
Oh, he loves to chuck out a 10 every now and again.
I do. With obviously all the caveats that both Lindsey and Millie have already said about, you know, there are areas that are weak, there are areas that are a disappointment. I think we touched on the direction earlier, and there were some amazing visual flourishes. There was some amazing design to, you know, try and get past the shortcomings of the budget. The monoids were silly, but they were adorably silly. They looked like someone had really gone out on a limb to have some ideas to do something different. It was, you know, like I said, sometimes it reminded me of a 1930s kind of RKO B-movie sci-fi serial. That's never a bad thing. Even when the plot's being really lame and tropey and you come down to two sets of aliens 3 feet apart failing to shoot each other. And then they walk away from each other very slowly because of the stupid flippers they've been given by design. It's just charming and engaging and sweet and lovely, and choosing to ignore all the thematic and subtextual problems that the story may or may not have, and let's face it, it probably has. I'm just going to lump on the side of fun and say I enjoyed every second of this, so it's a 10.
Excellent. There seems to be a connection between Lindsey coming onto the show and you giving the lesser loved episodes 10
Clearly
out of
it's because
10.
I bring out the protective, enjoying side of you.
I think it's because your intelligent analysis makes Iain see these stories in a completely different way, and that's what drives him to go for a 10.
Kind interpretation, I suspect.
And slightly cruel to Iain that he can't actually make his own mind up. He has to be told what to think by someone else. But, you know, that's my take on it. Oh, well, the pressure's on now, isn't it? I do enjoy this one. I like it. I love the direction, as Millie was saying, the opening episodes, the shots in the jungle, the crane shots. I think it looks really good in terms of 62. There are kind of issues. We can't really avoid that, but I think for all that, it's an exciting story. It plays with time, as we've said. It's not something that gets done very often. And for all that, I am going to give it an 8.
Wow.
This will get them talking when we do the ratings at the end of the season.
Yeah, this will unexpectedly win over the Daleks' master plan.
It's like the chase all over again.
You'll be so cross, you'll storm off and I'll be left running the show on my own. Oh my God.
Well, yes, quite.
Cool.
Anyway, that's what we thought. Let's go to some listener feedback and find out what you guys think of this story.
I've got mail.
So let's see what feedback we've had on the story. We've had a whole ton of people responding, so thank you all again for tweeting and getting in touch with us and emails and all sorts of other things. We're going to start off with a bit of audio feedback from our dear friend Ben Schneider down in Indiana.
Okay, guys, the Ark. Okay, I have to say it. This story has some of the best creature costume designs ever on Doctor Who. I mean, that is the most realistic elephant suit I have ever seen. It is so good. And props to whoever was, inside of the big old elephant suit and making it walk, because it is super realistic. Awesome work, guys. Seriously, they should have got whoever made that big old elephant suit to come back in 18 years and make the Merca costume for Warriors of the Deep. It would have been so much better. It would have been flawless. Because seriously, The elephant suit is that good.
Thank you, Ben. And on the old Twitters, we have heard from David M. at Mrs. Remington fan. And they say, great story. It's a lot of fun. One of Hartnell's best stories. And next up, we have James H. At FitGeek_UK. And they say, love the story to bits as long as I don't think about how utterly insane the actual setup of the arc is as shown on screen. Yeah, that's quite fair, I think. And next up, we've heard from Dread at Dr. 13 is the Beast. And they just simply say, I enjoyed it. So very straight to the point, but very succinct. And we've also heard from The Last Centurion at Kelly's Encanter. And they say, I enjoyed it immensely. So, we're keeping it short and sweet. That's fine.
Yeah, pithy.
I'm feeling the love for this story. We've heard from Bernard at Bernard JKD. And Bernard says, flatters to deceive, but its heart is in the right place. Again, I think that's a fair comment. And the last tweet from me is from Sad Robot at Magnus Greel 70. And they are bucking the trend, just saying, not a fan. Very emphatic there. Not going to cut it any slack, just not a fan. So thank you guys. Before we head over to Millie, we have got a piece of legendary audio feedback from Andy Moore. When I opened this audio, when it came in on the email, I was somewhat blown away. So I'm going to drop that in here.
The Ark is the second best Doctor Who story with Ark in the title. Archive! Unless you would explicitly count Ark of Infinity, in which case it's still the second best. Archive! Dodo's got a cold or something, it's playing havoc with her accent. Archive! Peter Purvis is sharing the screen with an elephant. Let's see how that goes in the future for you, mate. Oh, blimey! Is that Patrick Troughton as a Monoid with John, Paul, George and Ringo? Go, 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 the Beatles. So many Beatles. And they all go hand in hand through their life. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, probably not, eh?
That is excellent. I'm very impressed.
Thank you, Andy. That was amazing. Wasn't that great?
It was awesome.
That was fantastic. As a Colchester boy, any blur is always a good blur. Wow.
Right, Millie. Unfortunately, you've got to follow that now. Who have you heard from?
I don't have to. It's the people that have tweeted us have to follow it. We've heard from Dave Kitchen from the Doctor Who show. He says, Hi Dave. He says, one of my absolute favourites. A big sci-fi premise, great aliens, some of the best use of time travel in the show's history, and the ethos of the show stated there on screen. Therefore, you must travel with understanding as well as hope.
Dave is a massive First Doctor
fan. He is, yes.
So,
and he continues, it's a Doctor Who quote I have over my desk. The Doctor arrives to save humanity and at the same time reminds us all of the value of all races and cultures. In premise and concept and philosophy, this is Doctor Who. So we've got quite a fan there.
Yeah, just a bit.
We've also got 42 to Doomsday. Any Hartnell story that fully exists in the archives includes an elephant, a fully equipped kitchen, and an awesome timey-wimey plot deserves high praise. I like it a lot. And we've got Ham-Fisted Bat Vendor. Says extraordinarily effective opening film sequence, marvellous set design, one of the great cliffhangers of the 60s, and a kitchen whose legendary status in the canon rivals that of the beleaguered Mrs. Farrell. Always enjoy this underrated gem. Mrs. Farrell, is that from Terror of the Autons?
I think it is, yeah.
The great CSO kitchen, yes. One of the great kitchens of Doctor Who. We also have Anthony Carroll. Anthony Carroll loved the idea, and first 2 episodes are good. Sadly, once the Monoids can speak, it was a bit painful. Love to have a punishment kitchen, though. 7 out of 10. R.I.P. Dodo. And then he's replied, sorry about that. He meant a security kitchen, not a punishment kitchen.
Yeah.
I read punishment kitchen, even though I had previously read that he corrected himself, because I quite like that term, punishment kitchen. I think that's even better than security kitchen.
Maybe that could be our a new quiz to replace the mind probe.
I'm seeing it as Greg Wallace and John Turode in some kind of S&M. No, just me. Okay, fine. To me, it was a leather tools, it was whipping, it was lovely.
And they're both wearing PVC and spandex.
All right, calm down, Lindsay.
Oh, it would.
And heels. Very high heels.
Oh, it's getting very hot in here. Oh.
I'm getting Bennick from Enemy of the World.
Oh.
That's all from me.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much. Iain, who have you heard from?
So we've heard from Jed Sweeney, who replies to one of Millie's messages, Lost in the Dawn of Time. Now he says, ahem, a fully equipped security kitchen, I think you'll find. Hammering home what a bizarre idea that is. Lily May Sherritt, Irene Wildtime, says, I think it's a gem of a story when they materialise in the same place. Love the monoids as well. Plus, I really love the bit when Stephen is defending them in the trial as well. So thank you for that.
We have a Stephen fan.
We do have a Stephen fan. Stephen fan, I should say. We've heard from RMT Union Paul. Vinyl music lives. I like the cut of his jib. He says, currently watching The Rescue, going through episodes The Romans next, so we'll be watching this soon. So I guess if we just sort of wait here for 30 seconds, he might
we'll hang
catch
about.
us up. We'll just give that a go. We've heard from John Hall, who says, a story which gained unexpected relevance during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a great point. We didn't really talk about it much, but obviously the story with its premise on, a coronavirus getting loose. And we're, as a species, we're now really able to look at every aspect of this and look at the monoid response and go, was this whole hands space safe approach they adopted really good enough? Should monoid witty have been given slightly more freedom to, shape the public response to the pandemic?
Should the bumbling main monoid with the bad hair have been in charge and locked down sooner? And
was he the worst monoid for that moment of history? Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Going back to John Hall, who comes back and says, how many other Doctor Who stories can boast live elephants, costumes made out of streamers, security kitchens, and galaxy accidents? He's quite right. And
he is.
I speak for you, John, when I gave this story a 10. This is a masterpiece. Thank you to everyone in my little group here for getting in touch. It's like one big family.
It is. And we love hearing from you guys. And now, Lindsay, who have you heard from?
So I have got some stuff here from the Crinoid podcast. So that's at Crinoid podcast on Twitter. Pure sci-fi with some great ideas, impressive special effects, and a cracker of a twist in the middle. The monoids are daft, and the elderly Boris Karloff on ecstasy commander is unintentionally hilarious. All adding to the fun. Mark and Iain, may all your kitchens be secure.
Thank you, Jim.
And then from Who Can Convince You, also on Twitter. I really enjoyed it when we did this one. It's Doctor Who sci-fi black and white goodness. The effects are great for the most part too. I think I prefer the first two parts to the latter two, but the shock future aspect saves it. Tristram Carey 2, so win-win. Luke probably thinks it's, and then there's an emoji of human excrement, also known as shit, depending on whether or not we say that in this podcast.
We can.
Okay, in which case he probably thinks it's shit. But he carries on, not and, should point out that the Anne Robinson monoids aren't too bad when they're silent, but when they speak, let's just tell everyone the plot, shall we? And that bloody little truck they drive. Christ.
Before you go on, Lindsay, I must say that's from Harry from the Who Can Convince You podcast. Harry and Luke were very kind to invite me onto their show. Well, it'll be quite a while ago by the time we actually put this one out. and they're really lovely guys, and they have a great show. They like to ramble, it has to be said, and they can be quite long shows, but it's tremendous fun. So if you haven't had a listen to that yet, you should definitely check it out.
Next, I've got, again from Twitter, Philip Edney. The Ark continues an amazing run of inventive and unique stories. They don't all work, but they do all try new things. Episode 2 and 3 is a lovely twist. Is this one of the first time jumps ever used on TV? If only the humans had taken the virus seriously and got themselves vaccinated. Fair point.
It's a lesson for everyone there.
Well, there was some kind of inoculation going on, so,
Yeah.
And last but not least from my little collection, we've got RV Athletics fan, also from Twitter, a patchwork of a story. So humans oppressing the poor monoids, and shows how, when freed, they are evil and dictatorial. And our first batch of invisible aliens. This one has always been a tough watch for me.
Thank you, Ross. Yeah, I think he's not so much of a fan, but thank you all so much for all your feedback. It's always great to hear from you. And if you want to get in touch about a episode we're going to be covering later down the line, we will be listing all the ways and means over our end credits. So it just leaves us to thank the wonderful Millie and Lindsey for joining us. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Before you disappear, we'll come to each of you and we'll let you give a little plug for what you do. So, Millie, where can people find you online if they want to check out your amazing artwork?
They can find me on Twitter. My tag is at Cowbeer Creates. Beer, the animals, if you want to know how to spell that. And also on Instagram is Cowbeer Creations. And I just post lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of pictures of all of my little models that I make out of polymer clay.
Your work rate is incredible.
It's because I have no life.
The detail is...
Do any of us these days?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're in very good company here, Millie. That's all I can say. So, yeah, if you want to check out what Millie does, they are incredible. The attention to detail, and they're just so cute. So thank you, Millie. And Lindsey.
Yeah, so the best place to find me is also on Twitter. You can find me at LHA_again, mostly for a strange collection of political and Star Trek related nonsense with the occasional appearances from other fandoms. And you can also find me on the Trek This Out podcast, which can be found on Twitter at Trek This Out Pod, and on all your good pod hosting preference podcatchers. There we go, that's the word I was looking for. On all good podcatchers.
It is a great show, good fun. They've got a lovely team. We've had most of you on now. So there's yourself, and there's Lindsey, and if you hang around for a few more episodes, you may even encounter, in fact, it's a bit of an exclusive here. In our next episode, The Celestial Toymaker, we will be joined by the captain of Trek This Out himself, Mr. Sucky Kark.
I do love the fact that you have just named me and then me again as opposed to my other female co-host. You've just done a classic Suki.
Well, I like to... he's set the template, so...
Well, that's it. But I do believe Andrea has also come to visit you, has she?
She has. You won't have heard it yet, but yeah, she's opening season 3 for us.
I'm sure
with the
it will be
majestic
delightful.
Galaxy 4.
She's always good value, is Andrea.
She certainly is. Thank you both so much for joining us. It's been a real blast, and we'd love to have you back again another time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mailbagofrassilon@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter @TimeEndSpacePod, and you can also find us on Facebook. If you want to leave some audio feedback, there is a link in the show notes. You can use your phone or your computer and leave up to 60 seconds of feedback, or if you're listening via the Anchor website, you can click on the message button and leave your audio. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Momo Tempo for providing our theme music.